And I bitch, that's not my kind of music.
So Gramps, that's our podcast music.
Oh, okay.
It's a little jazzy, but you don't like it, huh?
Oh, well, gee whiz, if I can't have country music, forget it.
So I'm Mike Cosgrove with Pro Concepts. The insurance agency is Professional Concepts Insurance Agency. Our podcast name is Pro Concepts, of course. It's September of 2023, kind of a rainy fall day. And this is our 17th podcast. And I will say I have my favorite guest of all times on the podcast, and that is Grandpa. We refer to him as Gramps. It is my wife's grandfather, and he is 94 years old. Hi, Gramps.
Yes, sir. Hi.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I coined this podcast, 94 years old and still going strong, how hard work can propel your life. And so I figured I'd ask Gramps some questions and that kind of thing. Did you have something you want to say, Gramps?
No, fine. Go ahead and ask questions.
Okay. So I always start this off and ask, what's your favorite book?
Well,
of all times.
Huckleberry Finn was.
Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, yeah. I loved Huckleberry Finn.
That's a good one. That's, what is it? Tom
Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn.
Yep. And Jim. Yep.
Yep. And Jim.
Yep. Nice. Awesome. And you also used to be a big reader of National Geographic?
Yeah, we had a subscription for National Geographic for years.
Okay. All right.
But what I've dropped it. It got too expensive, but
sure.
I don't read as much anymore as I used to.
You don't need to.
No.
You already know it all.
No, no. No, if I knew anything at all, I wouldn't be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I live at 2741 Island Highway in Charlotte, Michigan.
Off of Highway 69.
No, Island Highway.
Oh, Island Highway. Yes. And what is that? Interstate 69.
It's just off Interstate 69.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
A couple of miles.
Sure. Yeah.
I was born and raised right on that corner. My folks bought the place in 1921. My wife and I bought it from them. Well, my mother had been killed by then, but 58 or 59.
Okay.
And I had hauled milk off the farm in 10-gallon cans into the dump station in Charlotte. The dump station was run by Pet Milk Company.
Okay.
Now, we were not employees of Pet Milk.
Sure.
You were called an independent contractor. You owned your own route, but they didn't have any money invested in it.
Sure.
You did.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to increase, you got paid by the 100 pounds of weight for your money.
Okay.
So the more poundage you had, the more money you made.
Sure. And so that's actually how you met your wife.
Yeah.
By being the milkman.
Yeah, she ran off with the milkman.
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah. Because you would, her home, she lived at home with her parents.
Yes.
And you would take milk to their farm.
Oh, I know. I picked up milk at their farm.
Oh, you picked up milk. Okay.
Yeah, it was a grade B market that I was working for.
I gotcha. Okay. And how many routes did you have, Gramps?
Well, before I got all through I had probably 4 different routes all jammed into one.
Okay. And you would buy these routes and then you'd have drivers work different routes.
No.
No?
No. I drove them all.
You drove them all. Okay.
The last few years after I bought out the last route, they call it the flush in the summertime. The cows were out on grass and you had more milk than you did in the wintertime.
Okay.
But in the summertime, I'd flush out hauling 13 or 14,000 pounds of milk
Sure.
a day. And in wintertime, it dropped down to 10,000 pounds a day.
Okay. And one thing I wanted to ask about the route, I think you had mentioned when you bought the route, it was not in good shape.
Oh no, it was in terrible shape.
So how did you build the route back?
By stopping here and there where you saw a pile of manure out behind the barn, maybe they got cows.
Oh, I gotcha.
So you stop and knock on the door and talk with them, and some of them say yes, and some of them say no. Some of them been skimming, and they were happy to be able to just sell their whole milk to the company and go that way.
Okay.
So you had to do. Nobody went out and hustled up new customers. You had to do it yourself.
Sure. That was your responsibility with the route.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. What was your hit ratio? Like out of 5 people you'd stop at, how many would say yes? Do you know? Any idea?
Maybe 1 out of 5.
1 out of 5. That's not bad odds.
No, it wasn't bad. Well, you had to present yourself, and after I'd got acquainted with people, once in a while I'd be a little late one morning, and they'd say, "Did you take an extra piece last night?" Oh, that was not nice.
So you had up to 4 different routes at one time, and then
Well, yes, they were all combined into one.
all combined into one.
Yep.
Because you kept growing them.
Well, some of the grade B market kept shrinking,
Okay.
and some of them, when they got down, they didn't make money enough, so I would buy the guy out and
Sure.
add it to mine.
So you and Grams then marry. This was before you went in the Army, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you and Grams marry, and then you went into the Army.
Yeah, I got drafted and had to go work for Uncle Sam for a while.
Sure.
I was in the military when my folks went to Florida to see my older sister and got in an accident. My mother got killed outright. My dad, they left him out in the hallway figuring he was going to die, but he didn't.
Mm.
So I applied for an early out to come home and take care of my dad.
Yeah.
So I got out in 21 months instead of 24.
I gotcha. How long did your dad live after that? Did he live for years?
I think it was either 7 or 9.
Okay. I gotcha. And so when you were in the Army, you had your routes.
No.
Oh, you did not have the milk routes at that time?
No, well, I had sold the milk route just before I knew I was going to be drafted, so I sold the milk route.
Oh, I see.
And got out of it. Before I got out, I went back and bought another route.
Okay.
And my brother-in-law, Bill Steele, was laid off at the time, so he ran the route for me until I got back.
While you were in the Army?
Yeah.
I gotcha. Is he the guy that drove one of the trucks into the swamp or something?
No. No, that was all over before that young kid took off. And
okay.
That was a sad deal. He went around the corner too fast and got off on the edge of the road and tore the whole side out of the milk box, and his cans were scattered out in the swamp. And it was a mess.
That's when you decided you didn't want to do that anymore.
No, I sold it right. I split it between 2 other guys and got out of it.
Is that right? Okay. So when you got out of it, what did you do from there?
Well, I had gone to work for the freight company.
Okay.
Because
sure.
we had to have insurance because of our oldest son.
Sure. You had 5 kids.
We had 5 kids.
Yeah.
Our oldest boy had MD, and
sure,
we lost him when he was 21 years old. And
yeah.
So we've kind of been up and down the road a little bit.
Sure. So when you sold the milk trucks and the routes and that type of thing, then what did you do?
Well, I had gone to work for the freight company.
For the freight company.
I was working there nights.
Okay.
And that milk company had started to take bulk milk, and they were paying a 20-cent premium if you had a bulk tank.
Oh.
So I had 6 or 7 bulk tanks on the route.
Okay. And
what I was going to do, I was going to convert it all the bulk, and I get out in the morning, and you run half the route one day and half the other. So I got out of work at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
And I would have come home and jumped in the truck and hauled the milk and gone home and done a little farming and went to bed.
So, in today's world, we have trouble with some folks getting a job, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and you had, I don't know if everyone picked up on that, but Gramps had 2 jobs and you were farming. And I wanted to get to that too. So the property that you still live on, the property I think you were born.
I was born there.
Born there as well.
Yes.
And so you farmed it.
Yeah.
What did you farm?
Well, we had 80 acres.
Sure.
When the folks first moved there, they had 40.
Okay.
And one of the neighbors up the road had 80 acres, and it was 40 that joined our 40.
Sure.
So we bought that, and somebody else bought the other 40 on the other side.
Okay. And you farmed some of it, and then did you rent some of it out to a buddy or something?
Yes,
that would
one
farm
of the neighbors rented it out.
Sure.
I had a couple of fields that were kind of wet, and he didn't want to mess with them, so I played around with those.
And what did you farm though yourself?
Well, at one time I was farming our 80 and another 40, but that didn't last very long.
But you were vegetables? Are we talking cows? What are we?
Cows and field corn and wheat, beans.
Okay. So you had a multiple milk routes.
Yes.
You sell that. Then you went to work for Freightline.
Yes.
Well, you worked at Freightline at the same time for a little while.
For a little while.
Then you farmed your property, raised cows, sold cows, and you rented off portion of your property to someone else it's quite the entrepreneur.
Well,
it's a fancy term, but
there was
quite the entrepreneur, Gramps.
Well, there was part of the farm was fairly low, and the neighbor that was doing it didn't want to farm those little spots.
Sure.
So I went ahead and farmed those.
Right.
Just to stay out of trouble. Or try.
So, but from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I'm just amazed at all the different things that you did and how it went from this to that and how you figured those things out, and you worked a lot of hours.
Well, hard work never killed anybody.
There's our first quote. Hard work never killed anybody. I love it. That's a good one. So, so you and Grams met when you were having your milk route?
Yes.
And you and Grams were married for how long?
68 years.
68 years. And we lost Grams 2 years ago in July?
2 years ago in August.
2 years ago in August. Yeah. Okay. 2 years ago in August. Yeah.
Well, see, when I first bought the milk route, she was still in high school.
Okay. Sure.
And I took one look at her and I said, now there looks to me like she'd make a good wife. Well, I made a hard and fast rule. I didn't date my milk chipper's daughters.
Sure.
So I didn't.
There's a little bit of advice for everybody. Smart.
Well, I didn't date her until after she was out of high school.
Sure. Right.
And then we got together. And
now, when you got together, I know you met through the milk route, but when you got together, were you still the milkman?
No, they had.
Okay.
There was a place called Wyeth Labs in Mason.
Okay.
And they developed some kind of formulas for baby milk.
Oh.
And they came along and offered 15 cents, 100 more if you go and ship milk with them. So Harold went with them.
Oh, okay.
And you can't blame him.
Sure. And that's when you and Graham start dating.
Yep.
Married 68 years.
Yep.
So here's what's kind of interesting about this. When my wife and I, and I've had Allison on the podcast before, when my wife and I decided to get married, I think Allison picked the date, but she did not know that she was picking the exact same date as Grams and Gramps. So we both celebrate our wedding anniversary on October 17th.
Yes.
And what's coincidental about this, when Gramps and I sat down here to do the podcast today, is that this is our podcast number 17, which we think
17's a good number.
17's a good number. Yeah. So we think it's a sign from Gramps when I found that out. So Allison and I celebrate 25 years in October next month.
I hope you make 68 or 70 or better.
I hope we do too. You guys set the stage for good stuff. So I love that. Definitely. So let's talk about some of your favorite sayings. You've got some good ones.
Right at the moment, I can't think of any of them.
All right. Well, let me get you started, because I know once we start, you'll be good with it. So one of the ones you told me was, if you want something, you better be ready to work for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was instilled into us from our parents.
Sure.
If you want something, don't hold your hand out.
Right.
Get your butt in gear and go do something.
Sure. Yep.
Well, I used to mow yards around the neighborhood with a little old 12-inch wide reel type push mower for 50 cents a yard.
Ooh, yeah. How old were you when you did that?
Oh, I was a teenager.
Yeah. Was that your first job?
Well, it really wasn't a job necessarily, but yeah, that was the first money-making thing I ever did.
Sure. Yeah. That's what started. So, and I didn't ask you this before, but so after you were cutting lawns in your area where you lived, what did you do after that?
Well, after that, I went down to the milk company and was looking to do a summertime help job down there. They said, "We got a milk route for sale. Why didn't you buy that?" I said, "Well, I haven't got any money." Well, good Lord, I was 18 years old.
Sure.
I didn't have a nickel in my name. They said, "You don't need any money. We'll take care of all of that."
They needed somebody to work it.
Well, they needed somebody on that route because the guy that had been running it just ran it right into the ground. You never could depend on him to be anywhere or anything. The truck was a mess.
Sure. So it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful opportunity.
Well, the only way you added to your route was to stop and call on people and see what they were doing, if they were skimming and selling cream or one thing and another.
Sure. So when you got that route, I didn't realize you went right from mowing lawns as a teenager into the milk business. And so when you did that, I'm assuming you did that based on a handshake.
Well, not exactly, because the gentleman that was the field man for pet milk out of Charlotte, I had ins with the bank.
Okay.
So they went down and got to the money, and away we went.
But did you sign a contract, or did you shake hands that you agreed to take care of that route and grow the route and all of that? Do you remember?
Well, basically it was just a handshake.
Sure. So Grandpa, what does a handshake mean to you? Because I think this is important to talk about with young people and all people as far as that goes.
Well, when you take a man's hand and shake it, you better mean what's behind it.
Sure.
And if you don't, if you can't take a man's hand and shake his hand and look him in the eye and say, "Okay, we're in business,"
sure,
you got a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Good for you, Gramps. That's awesome.
Well.
All right. So, thoughts to live by Grandpa. Here's another one that you mentioned to me. Don't be afraid to meet people. And you kind of said that with the milk route specifically.
Oh, absolutely. You had to milk. You had to basically, when there were several other milk companies around doing the same thing that I was doing.
Sure.
And the people, if they didn't like you, they went to the other milk company.
Oh, sure.
So it was done on a personal basis.
Right.
You didn't chase the farmer's wife or his daughters.
Well, I did not realize, because I knew how you and Gramps met, of course, but I did not realize that you waited until after they were no longer really a client of yours before.
No.
So
She was fair game after that.
After that, then it's fair.
Yep.
Any other thoughts come to mind or bits of advice?
Well, you try not to bring your daily problems to work with you.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You nobody's interested in because you had a bad night or
Sure.
Whatever.
We all got issues.
Everybody has issues, but when you walked into a place when I went into the freight business, when you went into a place of business, you walked in there and you talked to whoever was in charge.
Sure.
And how are you today? Kids all right, and so on and so forth.
Sure. You had to get down to business.
Yeah, well, you didn't burden them with your problems. You could.
Sure.
We had enough problems, but you didn't lay them on somebody else.
Yeah.
They didn't want to listen to your problems.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the other ones you mentioned to me was, don't quit your job without having another job lined up.
Absolutely. It's a long time without a paycheck.
Exactly. Well, and I feel like, again, perhaps with the younger generations, it's just, they don't really think about that sometimes. They get upset with their boss, and so they quit without having another opportunity lined up.
Yes, that's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. Any other words of wisdom for our group? You got good ones,
Well,
Grandpa.
just be honest. Don't lie to people.
Sure.
Just do not lie to people, because it comes home and it'll roost right on your head.
Yeah, that's a good one. One of the other ones you had mentioned to me was, and this is one that I literally love. It's people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yes.
Kind of thing. I always think that's been a good one.
Well, absolutely. You listen to their problems and converse with them, and they'll lay some problems on you that you probably really shouldn't know.
Sure.
But you kept your mouth shut. You did not pass that on down the line.
Right.
Because it would come home to bite you.
Right. What no one is probably picking up on is that Grandpa was being very careful in choosing his words carefully as he was saying that.
You knew when you pulled into after I was started in the freight end. You knew who you could come in and tell a dirty story to, and who you couldn't.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. So let's end it with this. So 5 kids. You got a slew of grandkids.
Yes.
And a slew of great grandkids.
Yes.
You're busy.
Love them all.
Love them all.
Do the best we can. It's we all miss my wife terribly, but
absolutely,
the good Lord did her worse than we did, I guess.
Yes. Yes. We'll see her again someday.
I sincerely hope so.
We will, definitely. Grandpa, I'm inspired by you. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. You were quite the entrepreneur back then. And I'm impressed to know you and call you family and Gramps, of course.
Well, I'm impressed to have you, believe me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in on Pro Concepts. I'm Mike Cosgrove with PCIA. And if you need to get a hold of anyone, my direct number is 810-224-5255. Thank you. We'll see you next time.